Hello, I am Sam Waters, General Manager of Consulting at Cubery, and I'm here to discuss the F-word. Don't worry, not as controversial as it might seem, as we're talking about effectiveness, F for effectiveness, and in particular, creative effectiveness to be precise. So our objective here with the F-word is to break down what really makes ads work with a bit of a fresh take, a bit of fun, hopefully, and a clear framework to separate those hits from the misses. So I might just start with a question for our listeners. Have you ever found yourself thinking, perhaps in the middle of the night, why is there no game show about advertising? Worry not, because this is exactly what you've been waiting for, or at least maybe something that you didn't know that you needed. Because we're going to be turning creative effectiveness into a head-to-head challenge, breaking down probably a brand new ad, a buzzworthy ad, something that's been getting the LinkedIn hordes chatting, and predicting how it performed with, that opinion that sometimes matters, the final outcome, the consumer themselves. So we have tested a brand new ad, and we'll be testing that data and bringing the data to you, brought to you by my co-host, and let's call her the voice of the consumer, Caitlin. Hi there, Caitlin.
Hello, Sam. How are you?
Very good. Thank you very much. And here's the really fun bit as well. I'll also be joined by an expert, a name from the world of marketing, advertising, or insights, an expert, and together we'll be putting our expertise, our knowledge, maybe our blind luck to the test to see who is more in tune with effectiveness. It's almost who's more in tune with the consumer. Big task. So play along, argue with our takes, but hopefully we'll all learn a little bit more about what makes advertising actually work. So more on how we'll be assessing advertising and the creative performance shortly. But first, I'm sure you're curious to meet today's guest. And today I'm happy to be joined by someone who really embodies the power of curiosity, and that is Adam Murphy, founder of Curioso. Hello, Adam.
Good morning, Sam. How are you doing?
I'm very good. How are you today?
I'm very excited to be part of this. Not only am I a massive insights nerd, but I love a game show, love a puzzle, so can't wait to get into it.
See, why has it never been done before, eh?
I honestly don't know. I'm hoping it's going to make a really great break from the fairly dry content that tends to be lobbing around the place these days.
That is definitely the aim. And just to tell everyone a little bit more about yourself and sing your praises before we jump in, and you can tell yourself a bit more, tell everyone a bit more about you. From our perspective, Adam is certainly a brilliant kind of marketing and thinker and insights expert who's very much made a career out of asking, I guess, the right questions. And in 2021, he launched Curioso to help businesses uncover opportunities by digging deeper into how people think, how people feel and behave. And the ethos of Curioso is curiosity leads to understanding, which creates opportunity, which I absolutely love. And that ethos, I think, really sums up what you're all about. But I was just wondering, how did curiosity become such a big driver in your work? And even now, how does it play out with you in the day-to-day?
Yeah, I think curiosity was always there, but it was relatively recently, I guess, but just before starting Curioso, that I started to piece the puzzle together on that one, right? So having worked in insights in Australia and in global roles based in the US, both consulting side and client side, in a big FMCG or CPG company, I always found that the success that I would have was based on, not being the person with the answers, but being the person that asked the right questions at the right moment. And one of the CEOs in my tenure at CUB literally said that to me, and the penny dropped. And I was like, okay, it's about the questions. And so as I started to think about what was coming next for me, I realized I really wanted to pursue that. And that meant pursuing more broadly, across multiple clients, which is why I decided to make the leap to start Curioso and help companies move, I guess, almost beyond the concept of an insights team and start to talk about curiosity as a skill and a habit and a talent. We should be growing in all marketers. It's not something that the team that sits over in the corner on the third floor or whatever does. It's something that we should all be passionate about.
Yeah, for sure. And it's in any industry, but in marketing in particular and advertising and brand management, there is still a tendency to try and know the answers rather than be curious about the right questions to ask. So yeah,
we are kind of trained that's the corporate model, of the 20th century that's going to bled into the 21st century is trained us that the people who have the answers are the ones that grow and get promoted and become leaders, but you can only have the answers if someone asks the right question. So I think that it's not the questions are more important than answers, but you don't get to the right answers, the deep answers, the answers that can unlock real opportunity, unless you spend some time thinking about the questions and connecting with people so that those questions can bubble up to the surface.
The world definitely needs more people asking questions at the moment, but let's not go there. And I guess just one, before we jump into the ad itself, just one more question around, what we do and what the broad aim of this, of course, is bringing in consumer voices, trying to understand how marketing and brands can get the right answers before they go too far down a path. I just wanted to get your thoughts on this broad aspect of the role of bringing consumer feedback. And you've produced some big campaigns in your career. I was wondering from your perspective how you see the role of testing in building great creative, where it fits in and its benefits.
Yeah, look, I would say over the many campaigns that I've been lucky enough to work on and working in the beer industry in particular, there's lots of opportunities to make big ads. I've worked on Super Bowl ads. Obviously CUB has a history of making really big creative, but across that and then clients I've worked with Curioso, I think the thing that stands apart the really amazing ideas from the just good ideas is there's always got to be iteration. You rarely come to the perfect idea right off the bat. And so there's iteration, and sure, sometimes that can be done within teams. But I think the role of pre-testing, or the creatives that use pre-testing the right way, see it as input to keep making the idea better. It snowballs and adds layers to an ad, that they take a yes and approach to the way that they hear creative feedback that comes from pre-testing and want to have it. I think those that still resist it a bit are a bit protective of the idea as it is. And, worst case scenario, if you do the pre-testing and it says, it doesn't lead you to a better place, you've still got the idea you had. So I kind of see it as a no loss. You can't go wrong by at least taking the chance on it, especially if it's a really big, important piece of creative that you want to use across a lot of channels and things. But nowadays with the testing tools that are available, like Cubery, like it's affordable and effective to test, even smaller spots.
Yeah, absolutely. I think certainly it's something that we say of everyone comes in looking at where testing fits in the grand scheme of things. But it doesn't need to, and it always goes to that place. It doesn't need to be pass fail. And that is a way of thinking of pre-testing probably from 20, 30 years ago that does exist with some people. But the important thing is it's just bringing in another stakeholder. It's an important stakeholder, but you're balancing that with the in-house team, the marketing team, the brand team, but the agency as well, who have this bigger vision. So why would you not test? That's always our point of view, of course.
Yeah, I just think, why would you not want to find that out before you finalize production, before you spend the money on media, rather than put something to air and then have a keyboard warrior on LinkedIn point out something where you go, it would have been better if we did that. Might as well find that out in pre-testing.
And you mentioned Michelob Ultra. We obviously test Super Bowl ads each year, and that was a particularly strong one.
I'm very biased. I was fortunate to be the first global director of Michelob Ultra, and we turned it into a global brand and produced a Super Bowl ad, got to put a Super Bowl ad to air. I will say the teams that have followed and I'm very proud of them because the ads are getting better every year. So I think mine is kind of constrained to the archives now. But yeah, there were some really, really great spots out there, and I did love the humour and the Michelob spot from this year.
Yeah, definitely a star. And I always say Michelob rather than Michelob. Got to remember that one.
I'm sure we're probably all mispronouncing it. Somebody with a German background can probably correct us.
Precisely. Excellent. I think that brings us on to today's ad. So the ad today that we're looking at is a newly released one from Kia. I think it came out probably just a few days ago, and it's part of a series of ads to launch the car brand's first ute in Australia for our international listeners, viewers. Utility truck, but essentially a pickup truck. So not a model that Kia has done in the past. So the car itself is coming out middle of the year, so quite a build up to it. And the ad itself takes place in a fictional town called Tasman Town, and the action revolves here around a runaway horse, which I believe is Buck the Bronco, mascot of Queensland, I believe.
I grew up in Brisbane. That definitely stood out to me.
Oh, there you go. Not one I was familiar with, and it brings us on to probably a few of the sports people as well who inhabit this town. So a huge list of Australian sports people. Some of the main ones: Dylan Alcott, Buddy Franklin, AFL player, and Volk, who I believe is a mixed martial arts. How familiar are you with all the sports people here, Adam?
Well, I mean, not to get too far into the analysis already, but I thought they did a really good job with the sports people in the ads, because I think regardless of your sporting passion, whether you like AFL, Buddy Franklin's in there, you know, people will see Steve Waugh, everyone's going to recognise him. People know Dylan Alcott, rugby league fans will notice, you know, Darren Lockyer and Alfie Langer. And in the Volk, I actually don't follow UFC very much, but I knew him from an ad that Sportsbet did where one of his competitors made fun of him for being old. So they parodied him like as an old man picking tomatoes and making his sauce for people and stuff like that. So I think they've done a good job of mixing it. So regardless of which sports you love, you're probably going to recognise a handful of people within the spot.
I have similar views, but we'll get on to potentially some differing views on that one as we go through. Have you seen this ad? I don't know whether you watch much TV. It's one of those ones of when do you actually see it? But have you seen it on air at all at this stage?
I haven't seen this one in the wild, but I certainly saw the preceding teaser from literally, I think, a year ago. They teased the idea that they were going to be launching a ute as well in a similar format, but fairly consistent to this one.
And before we talk about what we think the broad population will think, as a Kia driver yourself, Adam, did you like this ad?
Yeah, I did. Right, and I'm probably not at a stage of life or don't have the kind of job where I'm going to be buying a ute. But beyond that, I guess kind of the performance element of it, it did reinforce things I liked about the Kia brand. So I think it worked from that level.
Good to know.
My Kia's getting a bit old, so if the people from Kia are watching and want to, help me upgrade, then maybe we can talk.
That's the audience is big, Adam. Hopefully, right. Before we jump into the wild guesses, should we call them guesses or call them informed thoughts? Before we do that, it's important to obviously know what we're judging the performance on. And this is the criteria that we're going to be using. So we'll be focusing essentially on advertising's biggest job. There are a number of things advertising needs to do, but its biggest job is to grow mental availability for the brand that it's advertising. And I'm going to bring in a bit of Byron Sharp quoting here as we have How Brands Grow there, because he puts it best in terms of that role. So advertising's job is to lay down or refresh memories that will trigger when the buyer eventually, unpredictably goes to buy, making the brand easier to notice, recognize, and or recall. That is what mental availability is. I think this is a really good context because there's been conversation recently about mental availability being for more FMCG goods. But there's been a couple of, particularly on LinkedIn, I've seen people saying, actually, I've made a spontaneous buy for a car brand as well. So it still is very much relevant across all categories. So that summary from Byron, basically put simply, an ad needs to ensure the brand is imprinted on memories. So it needs to have this branded memorability. Otherwise, what's the point? If you don't remember it's for that brand, it's just entertainment. It's not sponsored entertainment. So I'll talk about each of those elements on screen, the emotional response and brand linkage, in a bit more detail. But essentially, we're examining to what extent an ad can stir an emotional response, but as importantly, whether that reaction will be linked to the brand itself. And it's an interesting one because we have seen in recent years maybe a bit too much weight being put on emotional response and forgetting about the brand linkage side of things. And that's just a view that I have. I don't know whether you've seen any of that as well, Adam.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I probably am one of those that because I approach things, I guess, from the insights and scientific side of things, have sometimes kind of had to be at odds with creatives in terms of saying, I get that their job is creative and they see it as making a film and wanting to connect with people. But at the end of the day, advertising has to do the job for the brand. And I think that there's a lot of great spots that we've seen over recent times where you just get this sting of the brand logo at the end. And what happens is when you go and talk to people about those spots afterwards, they say, "Oh, I loved that Christmas ad with the character," and you go, "And who was it for?" Oh, and they struggle. They sometimes get the category right, but choose the wrong brand, or often don't. They didn't care because they didn't care about it as an ad. They were just sharing the story they enjoyed, and the brand gets lost. So it's really critical we get that right.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds obvious, but it so often gets forgotten. So yeah, those two elements, the emotional response and the brand linkage, is what we're looking at here. I think that brings us on to the game. So I might just hand over to Caitlin to tell us a little bit more about it.
Yes. So, how the game works, Sam and Adam will make their guesses live as to how they think the Kia ad has performed against our broader database of all the ads we've tested. Now, they'll be scoring them from 1 to 5, low to high, in terms of how they think the Kia ad has stacked up against, or in terms of emotional response and brand linkage, which again, Sam will go into a little bit more detail on shortly. Basically then, I'll come in with the consumer point of view and show how the ad actually performed. So a correct guess for each metric will award you 3 points, and one level off will give you 1 point. So, all clear on that?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
You confident, Adam?
We'll see. I think you've tested a lot more ads. You've tested a lot more ads using this system than I have. We'll see.
I'm still surprised quite often by results, so we will see. And there is, hopefully, we don't get a tie here. There might be a surprise. What's the word I'm looking for, Caitlin?
Surprise tiebreaker. Yeah.
That's only if we get there. So, as for the grid you see in front of you, what we've done here is split our broad database of ad tests into quintiles. So if we think the ad will sit in the top 20% of our database on a metric, it will be a 5 and sit on the right hand side, or of course the top row. Conversely, if we think it's in the bottom 20%, it will be a 1 and sit on the left hand column or on the bottom row. So our scoring will reflect where we think the ad will perform relative to the distribution in our broader database. Okay, let's kick off with our first couple of metrics. So just to explain these two metrics, with emotional response, we're looking at likability and magnetism. Likability, the name is obvious. This is all about emotional positivity, i.e. how enjoyable people find the ad. And that comes from a range of drivers, of course: humor, characters, the emotions it stirs, nostalgia. That list is endless. It's essentially people take notice of things that connect with them personally. And that's essentially what we're looking at. It makes them feel something. The other element here is magnetism. So as the name suggests, this is about being drawn to something original, distinctive. Is it going to grab attention? And usually that is a positive. So it's something that's original, it's unique, it's distinctive. But it can also come from the dark arts of negativity. It can be annoying. It can be irritating. I'm sure I could any listeners at the moment, if I said, think of an ad that you remember that's annoying, it's there straight away. That has worked despite that annoyance. So this is all about emotional arousal. The ad must be noticed. It shouldn't just be pleasant or even worse, dull. Of course, not all attention-grabbing ads are well-liked, and not all well-liked ads are attention-grabbing, and magnetism is not having magnetism, but it needs to deliver on one of them. So, Adam, let's kick off. We're here. Likability first. What do you reckon? Enjoyed?
Probably. Well, I've got one clarifying question now that I go to answer this. Who did we test amongst? Was it
Very good question.
category buyers?
So we spoke to males and females who are in the market for a new vehicle in the next few years.
Okay.
So we're not looking at Ute buyers particularly, but people who might be buying in the future.
Okay, so likability, I am going to go 4. I assume it's got to be a whole number.
Yeah.
So a 4, pretty likable. What's your rationale behind it?
I think there's a lot of recognizable faces there. I think many of them are also people a bit bigger than the sport. So if you take Buddy Franklin or Dylan Alcott, lots of people like them. You don't have to know AFL or be into AFL to know Buddy. He and his wife are now quite famous as influencers. Dylan Alcott's on TV everywhere on the project, all sorts of stuff like that. So I think there's people in there that they can like. I think the reason I wouldn't go any higher than that, or I was kind of inclined to kind of a 3.5, is the world they've then built around it, I reckon might be a 4 amongst men, a 3 amongst women, if that makes sense. I think it's a fairly masculine thing, which makes sense for the category. Most Ute buyers, I would imagine, probably still skew relatively male.
So I was a 3 here, Caitlin. I think the story will certainly engage people. There's humour there, recognisable sporting stars. That will all resonate, which of course are powerful ways to drive this kind of emotional appeal. But I do wonder whether the general story potentially might confuse some people about what these sports people are doing, both in the sense of maybe people haven't seen the previous ad or remembering the previous ad, which sets the scene a little bit. But the plot itself of why are people chasing the horse? Where's the relevance to all of it? Potentially lost in that slightly whimsical scene. And I wonder whether not everyone will recognise they're big names. But I wonder whether some people won't recognise them. It took me a couple of viewings before I noticed it was Buddy Franklin. He just looked different out of context.
Yeah, and I think your point about, I guess my reading of the ad was taken on the basis because I had of people probably having seen the teaser ad because it seemed to get a lot of spend behind it. It seemed to be on everywhere that I looked. But I do agree, if you took it coming in cold, without that context, then it probably takes a few times to get it. I do like the fact that a couple of times, you might have to watch it a couple of times to catch all the sports people. Like after watching it the first time, I had to go back and go, who's the main guy driving? And then I realized, it's Volk. Once I took away the old man makeup and stuff from the other ad that I'd seen him in, I was like, that's Volk. So I actually like that it means that each time you watch it, you can maybe discover a little bit and go, that was actually Darren Lockyer that asked Alfie to let the horse out. So I like that part.
Are we hoping too much from the actual population to think that hard through it and find out more as they watch it each time?
I'm probably being quite optimistic in that, again, thinking about the core target audience that are buying Rangers and Tritons and all the other Utes in this category, that it probably skews a bit male, probably skews, that I've heard a client refer to them as a cashed up tradies, as a segment. So I think they're probably playing to their audience there. That might then recognise, as you said, the people out of context without. I do think it would have taken away from the ad if they put Damien Oliver in jockey silks and Buddy Franklin in a Swans jersey and stuff like that. It wouldn't have been the right way to go. So hopefully it works for them.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And Caitlin, before we reveal the score, we'll move on. We'll do magnetism as well. Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
So with magnetism, again, this is that unique distinctiveness, or potentially annoying, irritating. I might go first on this one, so I'm not always following you. So I think a 4 on this one. I think it's quite an original idea. I think the production of it is obviously very, very, very good, and that storyline definitely is building a level of originality. The star power definitely helping draw people in, and I actually think there might even be an element of, for those who are less into sport, maybe a little bit of an annoyance and irritation, but again, that's probably successful for it in that sense. How about you?
I also am a 4 for magnetism. You've said some of the reasons that I'd agree with. There was another element, and this is where I guess as professionals sometimes you can overthink advertising, but I did also like the fact that the setting, although it could feel a bit Wild West, that it does feel very Australian, because I think another thing that's been happening in the vehicle category in recent years is obviously the loss of Australian manufacturers, and I haven't necessarily seen any of the other international manufacturers that are now prevalent in Australia kind of lean into being Australian. So that kind of Australian country vibe and the use of all these iconic Australian sports people from across the years, I thought brings something different to, your classic ads of guys dropping sacks of concrete into the back of their ute and pulling guys out of mud puddles and those kinds of things that have prevailed in the category.
Yep. No, it's a very good point. And there's lots of talk of design for the Australian landscape, but it so often has the people on the bridge, that famous bridge by the cliff, every car ad in Australia has. And this does feel, of course, it is very, very rural and very outback. But I think even if you're metro, you can connect to that. So
yeah, for sure.
Okay, I think it's time for the scores, the big moment. How did we do?
So, Kia was actually a very strong performer in terms of original response. Yeah, very, very strong. So, scoring a full 5 for likability and full 5 for magnetism. But I guess you both definitely hit kind of the right points on the head. You hit the nail on the head, especially Adam, when you were talking about, having a number of different stars from different sports. So there's something that everyone can like. People really did like and appreciate that kind of star power going into the ad. That really caught attention. That humor in the narrative of them just building that kind of story together really worked well. And of course, this did flow into creating quite a unique ad. So another thing you said, Adam, was about that Australian setting. That stood out as really unique, and it worked quite well with the music as well to create a very unique ad overall, a really eye-catching and attention-grabbing experience from what people typically see, I suppose. A little bit stronger than we were expecting. Yeah, very impressive.
Did you see it, or was there a disparity in the genders? Or I guess given it's so high, it's probably doing well with everybody.
So we did have a quick look at the gender breakdown there. It was stronger amongst males, though that... Oh, I was about to spoil something. Can I spoil? I can't spoil, Adam.
Okay, fair enough. I'll ask you again later.
Yeah, ask me after the next round, yeah.
It's an incredible result. It's always tempting to go too narrow with sample, and this is, of course, something that always comes up with any researcher. Who do you speak to? I think going male-female here, it's about the bigger job for Kia overall, which does, of course, deliver to both. The fact that it's up here with a both gender sample, really, I'm surprised. Obviously, there's my score, but it clearly works. Maybe even though I've been here for nearly 15 years, my Australian sports knowledge isn't as strong as it should be.
It could be very contextual because I have to admit, Buddy Franklin, I'm a Hawthorn fan. There's a signed Hawthorn balls up there. And I grew up in Brisbane as a Broncos fan, so Darren Lockyer, Alfie Langer, they were also people who connected, but I think it would have worked just as well if you replaced Buddy with Brendan Favola and, you'd use New South Wales Rugby League people in there as well. So, but I might have had a slight inside advantage.
All right, so how did we do in terms of scores, Caitlin?
So, in terms of likability, obviously, Adam, you were a bit closer there, so 1 off, thinking that it was quite a highly likable ad. So that'll give you 1 point there. Sam, you were sadly a bit further. I'm so sorry. And in terms of magnetism, you both gave it a 4. So again, 1 point away, which leaves Adam, you are in the lead there. 2 points, and Sam, you're on 1.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
Strong start.
Yeah.
As I said at the beginning, you can be surprised. That's why we do research, eh?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It just proves we've both looked at lots of ads over a lot of time, and still didn't quite recognise exactly how strong this one is.
Mm-hmm. So we did see a verbatim there around it feeling very much like a show, entertainment. So that is really important. We've delivered the emotional appeal. Has it actually been sponsored entertainment? So will people remember it's Kia? So that brings us on to the Connect side of things. So when we look at Connect, it's not just a case of going, who was this for? Because there's many different ways you can get that brand linkage. So we look at brand attribution and brand fit. So attribution measures whether the brand looks like itself. Specifically, whether its distinctive assets are coming through, are they leveraged, the colors, the characteristics, slogans, music, all of those elements to leave that clear brand imprint on people. But also it can look at the side of things of whether the brand is the hero. Does it resolve any issues? And is it the solution? Does it have that clear role, which is pretty quite important here with all the celebrities. The fit side of things measures whether it feels like itself. So attribution, look, brand fit is about feel. So that's essentially, are the impressions that are being delivered and being talked about here, do they feel right for the brand? Are they compatible with what people currently think about Kia? So clear and strong memory structures are what help brands come to mind easily in those buying situations. So brand attribution, and it all about looking like itself for Kia. What do you reckon, Adam?
So look, I think this is an interesting spot because it's quite different to a lot of the other spots that Kia makes for their other vehicles. But if I was head of insights at Kia, I would be saying, guys, that's okay. My reverse engineering is, I think that's the intent. This is Kia moving into a really different subcategory within the vehicle world in terms of use. So I think that's quite intentional, but I think it won't be as recognizably Kia if you debranded it. That being said, I think the brand attribution, I'm going to go with a 4 for 2 reasons. One, they do a really good job of heroing a lot of times the front shot of the car with the Kia logo, which that new Kia logo was quite topical 3 or 4 years ago when they shifted from the oval. And I remember reading a bunch of things where the Google searches for what are KN cars suddenly went up in Australia because people were driving around seeing this logo, which obviously is KIA, but the way it's resolved looks like a backwards N. So I think that, and they've done a really good job. It's been all over, the tennis and, footy jerseys and all sorts of things everywhere. So I think they do a really good job of highlighting that a bunch of times. And it's clearly about the car. So you're looking at what's going on there. So I think if we ask people, was it a Kia ad? I think they're going to know.
I, again, am going to go for the 3 here. I agree with everything you said. I do wonder whether the story and the sports people maybe, even though the car clearly has a role there, whether they maybe take a bit of attention away from the car, and maybe could you switch out that Tasman for a Hilux potentially? Is it doing enough to talk to the kind of differentiation, I guess, of the Kia Tasman? I did notice as well that the Kia Sonic at the end comes in.
Movement that inspires.
Definitely has a role, but not sure still how familiar it is with most people. But I definitely agree. I think we'll see how it goes, but there is a clear need to slightly move away from what might be more familiar for Kia. So the focus might not be as much on Kia here. It's about the Tasman, and the Tasman probably stronger than the Kia elements in some regard. Yeah. So I'm a 3 on attribution. Fit, I'm also a 3. So again, does it?
Hedging your bets.
I'm well known for sitting on the fence. I am centralist in every way here. So given Kia doesn't have this model in market and the current range probably is more familiarity with family cars, I think this rough outside terrain and scenes might feel a bit distant from what people currently think about the brand and current expectations, and that is fine. It does mean the attribution and the fit might be a little bit less strong as a result, but it's about making sure essentially that people know something new's coming here. So it doesn't completely match with what people currently think, I believe, for Kia.
Yeah, I'm with you, Sam. I'm going to put it at a 3 also on the brand fit for a lot of those. I think it's both quite distant from the creative look and feel of most of the Kia ads, which honestly though then have tended to look like a lot of other car ads, the cars whizzing through the urban spaces and whatnot. But I also think it's a bit, they also have been communicating more about their hybrid and EV range recently. So it does feel, I think some people could see it at odds with, that's moving towards a better for the world kind of proposition. And then these giant utes that are now prevalent all over. Every time I try and find a parking spot, there's 2 taken up by the one ute. Might be at odds with that. I almost would have put it almost at a 2. The thing that I think that saves it, and I think looking back on it now that I think was a really smart piece of strategy, was the teaser ad from a year ago, which set up the idea that Kia was going to be launching a ute. It's allowed them to get a whole bunch of feedback from that, a whole bunch of pre-interest registered on their website and things. But I think it also set up this rural kind of cowboy Wild Western world that this ad now spots. It's back at the Tasman Hotel, which we saw in the first ad, and some of the sports people are the same ones that were in that original ad. So I think that saved them a little bit, and I think gives some chance that some people will see that continuity. I just hope that, unlike a lot of marketers these days, that they didn't stick with that continuity, because they've set up this world now. This is now the world of the Tasman. It would be a real shame if the next ad for the Tasman was all, features and bells and whistles and, like I said, tradies dropping their toolbox into the tray. That would be a miss.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to be applauded from the consistency of the campaign so far. It's only been 2 executions, but to have that thread, it obviously shows a very clear long-term strategy, and it's not rare to see, but a lot do drop off, and as new people come in and new ideas, it switches around. So I definitely agree. In a position like this, branding, we'll see if we're wrong, but branding doesn't need to be strong. But if it stays consistent, then of course that brand linkage is only going to grow over time, and it's based off that amazing foundation that we saw from the emotional side earlier.
It's probably a good point to make, which I know anyone that's worked with me will know I always harp on setting the action standards for the testing before you get the results. So, as I said, if I was the head of insights at Kia getting this one back, I would have set the action standard on brand fit here lower than usual, because we know we're doing something which is atypical for the brand. And I think it's important you have those discussions ahead of time rather than people post-rationalizing it later and saying, oh, that's okay because otherwise you can post-rationalize away anything. Whereas in this case, if this came back with those 5 scores on emotion, is good on brand linkage, but the brand fit is more of a struggle for people, that's probably to be expected. Be curious if they have any thoughts on that.
Okay, we have got our scores. Let's see where we are again, Caitlin. I'm nervous.
So obviously you both spoke a little bit about a potential kind of disconnect with the brand going in a new direction. However, it was still very, very strong. So consumers actually found a really strong brand linkage between this ad and their expectations of Kia. So firstly, on the kind of attribution side of things, obviously, Adam, you touched a lot on the logo being front and center, the car always being there. So what we saw a lot throughout this ad was that Kia Tasman really was heroed. So it really was the driver of the story. So I know, Sam, you raised concern about would the star power overshadow anything? We didn't really see this take too much effect because the entire storyline did still revolve around that car and the journey with the car there. So that always really being front and center. In terms of fit, we also saw really positive results that despite being a little bit of a different approach that they've used in the past, it did still feel very fitting for what people expected. So people really did feel that this more fun, humorous, lighthearted tone was a fitting direction for Kia to pursue. And I think what helped with that was that kind of Australian setting. So I know, Adam, earlier you also mentioned that that's something that we're not seeing as much of lately. So I think having that Australian setting, the music, the Australian celebrities all worked to really feel more fitting for Kia, and especially to help introduce their new Ute, which obviously fits better for those kind of scenes and landscapes and such. And so we can even see that coming through in people's verbatim on the screen. So people saying that this car is just perfect for the Australian countryside. So it really building a good fit there.
Yeah, I think that's great. And again, it proves the value of testing, right? That they've actually gone way better than we thought on connecting it to the brand. And I do think that, as I said, that setting the idea up before this ad was probably an important part of that.
So I think if Kia are listening and the prize is the Tasman, Adam, I fear it might be coming your way.
In terms of attribution, Adam, you were spot on, so giving you 3 points there, and Sam, you were 1 away, so still getting 1 point. For fit, though, we did see both of you obviously put that at a 3 when Kia scored a 4 there, so 1 point for you each there. And ultimately, for this round, Adam, that means you got a 4, Sam a 2, and in total, Adam, you're left at 6, and Sam just behind on 3.
6-3.
Mm-hmm.
Put my details in the show notes for Kia to park the Tasman in my driveway anytime they like.
Doesn't sound like you have a need for one. Maybe a Sportage or something they can deliver instead. But yeah,
sounds good to me.
There you go. I think it's proven 2 points. I've tested, who knows, the hundreds, the thousands of ads over the years, and so often I'm surprised by the results. But the importance of getting that broad population read. But I guess more importantly, well done, Adam.
Yeah, look, I think the ad performed really, really well compared to what I expected, and I think that's something that we can often do as well as professionals. We can look at things from where am I going to score it down? What do I think of the opportunities to improve it more? And sometimes you're on a winner. And again, that's why we need to test it. The next ad that you show with someone else, people might think it's great, and it might not be performing well with consumers. It could be the complete flip side, but that's why we test. It's only in the minds of the people it's intended for that we can really find out whether these ads are working.
100%. Yeah. So overall on those two, on brand and memorability, this is obviously in a wonderful place. So we're likely, there you go, top right corner. So the emotion response very high in the top 20% of ads that we've tested, and brand linkage, which we expected to be a bit weaker, is still in the top 40%. So Kia seem to be on a winner.
They're on a runaway, you might say.
They are on a runaway. I can't think of any other puns, but yeah, they are on a runaway. They're a runaway horse. Looks like it's going to be a good foundation for the release in the middle of the year. So thank you very much again. Well done, Adam. Thanks so much for your time today. It's really appreciating. Great to get your thoughts and insights.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. For viewers, if you enjoyed the game, let us know how you would have scored it. Air your opinions. Question why I was so far off. But stay tuned, obviously, for future episodes. And be sure to check out our website, like, subscribe, etc. And hopefully we made effectiveness effective. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.